Awaiting the confirmed status on this channel. Copy that. 10-0. Requesting spike count for dispatch.
The Combine are one of the greatest and most iconic antagonists in all of gaming. They're one of the enemy factions that inspired me to adopt the format of biological analysis in the first place. This happened, though, mostly as a result of the Combine synth units. In my original biological analysis of Half-Life 2, you can clearly tell my bias towards the synths, as I talk about them for much longer and mostly skim over the infantry. With that in mind, I've decided to cover the infantry units with better depth, trying my best to reference real-life sources. With that being said, let's start with the basics of what we know about the Combine. Following the 7-Hour War, the Combine quickly assimilated humanity into their empire. A majority of humans were simply made to be generic citizens, but many were either captured and forcefully modified, or, most likely later into the Combine's occupation, willingly joined due to harsh living conditions. What they did with humans when they first started experimenting on them is pretty much unknown, but eventually they came upon the design that we now know as the transhuman. This is a science fiction concept which goes back as far as the 1940s, but apparently, according to Wikipedia, might even have roots in the Divine Comedy, with the word transhumanar being used to describe transcendence beyond human nature. And that's essentially what the idea is. It's to have transcended past a point of humanity while still being derived from humans. In Half-Life, all human-based units are based upon the same transhuman template, which is actually not that differential from humans, on the outside at least. They wear full-body uniforms, often with ballistics armor padding, and, most notably, a mask and helmet combo that shares a resemblance with many Soviet gas masks such as the PMG. This brings me to an interesting point about the Combine. As one would expect with any generic alien species, when they take over humanity, they would usually force their own tech upon those subjects, but in Half-Life 2, rather than adapting their own pre-existing technology to work on humans, they instead develop new technology based on already existing human designs. I find this to be interesting, as logically it makes sense, as the majority of the Combine forces without humans that we see are just synths. Putting a human into some kind of huge synth armor or replicating humans as synths, Fallout 4 reference, could be done, but would likely lead to more conflict. Rather, basing the Combine forces on designs made by humans would allow them to be viewed in a more positive light, even if that's a very small difference. This would also allow the Combine to more effectively propagandize themselves, which brings me to my next point of interest. The Combine are heavy users of propaganda. One would think that with all the openly outward evil that they have done, this wouldn't really be effective, and in a way, it's not. I find that, while maybe not its intended purpose, the posters produced by the Combine serve to unnerve the citizens of City 17, and other cities if we presume that they are present there as well. The reason I assumed this is because there's no other way the propaganda posters like this could really work. In a society where the entire planet is basically an openly violent police state, I don't think it would really matter if they had published these posters or not, with the only purpose they serve being to remind the inhabitants that they should submit to this state. Some posters are more deliberate about this. Some even use the inhuman appearances of the Vortigaunts against them to get people to report them. But a majority of these posters seem to be made in an attempt to get the citizens to glorify the Combine, which I just find weird, since in the Combine's position, it doesn't seem that trying to raise morale should be such a high priority. My only explanation for this could be that these posters are being made or commissioned by Dr. Breen himself, which would make sense considering his human nature. While Breen is at the head of the Combine that occupies Earth, he is only a figurehead. The Combine are, in truth, commanded by a hyper-advanced AI called Overwatch. Generally, when referring to generic Combine transhuman soldiers, they are called Overwatch soldiers because they have direct communications with Overwatch itself. However, the Civil Protection Forces presumably do not have access to these comms unless given for an express purpose, and thus Overwatch is generally manifested as a female voice that comes from some distant speaker giving coded orders to the Combine, and warnings to those that they may be pursuing. Overwatch, and by extension the Combine soldiers, will refer to humans that act outside of the Combine's preferred boundaries as anti-citizens. I find it an interesting choice that the Combine simply announces their tactics out loud to these anti-citizens, considering that experienced resistance members will start to learn the patterns that the Combine soldiers may exhibit, although it could serve as a form of intimidation, as even then, Combine soldiers are extremely difficult to combat. As I said, they are considered transhuman, meaning whatever is under all that armor of theirs is so far beyond what any human has ever been that they are no longer even considered human in the first place. They've gotten some major brain alterations, ones which have resulted in the complete erasure of their memories and loss of their emotions. They've even had their vocal cords physically replaced by a vocoder so as to communicate more effectively. Most depictions of what the Combine looked like on the inside are fan art, with our only example being this guy in Nova Prospect. But even then, we never see what their full cross-section looks like. All we know is that the process of creating an Overwatch soldier is often described as straight-up mutilation, with them having chunks of flesh, their entire abdomen, and even their reproductive organs removed for maximum combat efficiency. With the basics covered, let's start with the people who are arguably the most known part of the Combine, Civil Protection. Now, during the late Combine occupation, a human's entry into the Combine forces would be by joining the ranks of Civil Protection. If they did this, they were promised better living conditions, better food, and protection of their families. Once they did this, they were able to be assigned a uniform that was the standard for all Civil Protection units. This uniform consists of a black coat with 4 belts tied around it. The bottom 2 hold the jacket in place and have 2 radio-like devices, as well as a holster for either a 9mm pistol or a submachine gun. The top 2 hold a soft-armored, presumably ballistic vest. This armor definitely seems to be effective, as most Civil Protection can survive a good few 9mm body shots and still be in active combat before collapsing. By far the most complex part of the Civil Protection uniform is the helmet. It seems to be based off the Soviet PMG gas mask, which was uniquely designed to be compact. The Civil Protection variant seems to serve the same purpose, however, it also has a small communications array on the sides. This will allow it to communicate with other Combine units, however, it does not allow it, or selectively allows it, to access Overwatch. This is primarily for the sake of not allowing humans who have been fully assimilated to learn of the Combine's plans. Now, the jacket is likely made out of a synthetic material that the Combine has synthesized, possibly something similar to nylon. It has 2 front pockets on the bottom and 2 zippable pockets on the arms. It also has a City 17 Civil Protection armband on its right arm. Its vest seems to be a soft ballistic armor vest, covering up only the torso and not the abdomen. The material that it directly uses to block bullets is likely to be some kind of Kevlar. As I said before, the Combine infantry employ the tactics that the humans already used, just better, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Combine bulletproof vests were simply using the same materials that humans used, but more efficiently in some way. The back of the vest is one large plate armor, however the front is shaped in this odd pattern that I'm not sure of the purpose of. Regardless, the overall vest definitely helps when absorbing bullet impacts, but it's not the only part that helps with this. The mask that the Civil Protection unit utilizes is actually pretty good at defending against bullets. Now, this may also have something to do with the stimulants that Civil Protection units are said to be provided with, but they can take a good few headshots with 9mm before they can no longer operate. For a human, this is most obviously not normal, and so I would assume that the mask is made from a kind of hard ballistic armor. Now, the mask has 2 attachments, a voice diaphragm and a filter. The voice diaphragm seems to be some kind of voice coder, as we can see the voices of the Metro Police are very clearly distorted. I would assume that this is for the purpose of allowing them to speak clearly even when injured, and to speak loud above crowds. It may also serve to keep the Metro Police anonymous in case they happen to offend any anti-citizen groups. The civil protection themselves don't really utilize any real tactics to any effective extent. I assume they definitely do have training, but that training is likely eroded over time, as the majority of all situations they are needed in are regarding unarmed citizens. This all changes though when a civil protection unit gets promoted. See, when any given Metro Cop is doing well at their job, they can be promoted to one of the transhuman units. This is presumably unwilling, as you would really have to lose basically everything about yourself that makes you human. Once a unit has been chosen, they can be promoted to a variety of these units, one of the most common being the Combine grunts. The grunts seem to be a kind of in-between unit, being a transhuman Combine unit but not entirely. We know this because upon being stripped of its gas mask, we see a variety of wires and metal. The Combine grunts are essentially sent in for situations where Metro Police would be unable to get involved, but where a military presence is unneeded. We see that this unit's uniform is a bodysuit, which points more toward its transhuman nature, as it would have no need to fully remove its uniform. Around it is a single tool belt which holds a pouch and 2 magazine holsters. Moving up, it has a utility belt going along its chest which holds up to 2 grenades. On its back, it has some kind of propane or oxygen tank above its backpack. Why it needs this, I do not know, but what I do know is that if you shoot it on this red cap here, it explodes. Now looking closely at the suit, it seems to be made out of a durable metal, possibly similar to what some modern day hazardous materials suits are made out of. It also has these 3 lines here, which I don't know the function of. I don't know why they're there. They're probably just there for texture, I'm gonna be honest. The gloves are generic workers' gloves, but with enhanced knuckles for better combat at close quarters. Looking at its gas mask, we see that it has an extra filter, which makes sense considering its use in the quarantine zone. It also has what appears to be a user interface within the lenses of the mask, which may allow for more detailed information from Overwatch, or better visual confirmation of threats. We can also assume that these holes on the side of its head are what allows it to hear. On the inside parts that we get to see of the grunt, we see that its eyes are actually not present, being replaced by the lenses themselves. This likely significantly enhances their vision. Additionally, we see a metal faceplate built into the grunt's inner face, which is likely to be some kind of structural support. On the back of its head, it has 2 scars, which I would assume are from surgery, or from the helmet being implanted into the head. Overall, this unit is how an individual may fully enter the Combine Overwatch. However, to see real military application, we would have to turn to the Combine Soldier. The Combine Soldier is the most utilized unit in the Combine ranks. It has completely lost any emotion, which has been replaced by strategic knowledge that was forcefully implanted into its brain. It comes in 2 primary variations, the Standard and the Shotgun. Both of these units are largely identical, with the only difference being the difference in eye color and armor color, and of course, weapon. The Combine Soldier is almost entirely covered in layers of soft ballistic armor plating, although there may be hard armor inside the vest that we simply cannot see. In fact, it appears that it wears some kind of jacket made from this material, with its real clothing being a full-body durable cloth suit, similar to that of the grunt. The design of its helmet is simple and functional, with the gas mask, voice diaphragm, comm system, and blue lenses, and that's pretty much it. I mean, in all honesty, there's really nothing special about this unit. I assume that it's the baseline for all Combine transhuman units, and thus, it's really as basic of a unit as it can be. With that simplicity though comes terror, as this unit is simply extremely proficient at all kinds of killing. A Combine unit with a more specialized utilization is our next one, the Combine Suppressor. The Suppressor is quite the oddity among Combine units. It is one which has deviated the farthest from the transhuman template that the Combine are generally based upon. As for why this is, I'm not too sure. We see that it retains functions of a gas mask, and presumably the eyes being rooted in the mask itself. In fact, this unit may be a direct upgrade to the Combine Grunt, as it has much of the same clothing style, even having the same gloves. I assume that if the new mask style isn't attributed to any kind of unique function, it's simply in place for the fear factor, as the narrower eyes and tapered snout make it a little more imposing. It also shares a resemblance with the sequel trilogy Star Wars alien designs, which I thought was funny. Moving down from the head, its torso is padded with a variety of armor strapped to its body, many of them being marked with Combine insignia. Its lower torso has this attachment here, which I believe to be an ammo pack. Now, suppressors seem to be trained or coded to fire in a particular stance every time. Their left foot forward, right foot back, and their shoulder facing the enemy. In a very interesting move, the Combine made use of this stance by placing a reloader on its stomach that aligns perfectly to this stance. This plays into the theme of ergonomics not really being a factor in Combine transhumans. With real soldiers, it would probably be quite unwieldy to have to press the gun to your stomach when you reload, as well as having to have the same stance every time you shoot, but with Overwatch, it's as easy as just doing those things. Another part of the suppressor, which shows that it must always have this stance, is a piece of armor particularly on its left leg. When I first loaded up the model, I thought it was a glitch, an error, but it seems that this was also put in place due to it shooting in this same stance. An interesting note about the suppressors is that in Combine terminology, they are known as APF units, or the Antibody Protection Force. This is quite an interesting name, as it seems to give some insight on the way that the Combine quote-unquote perceive fights. They see them as some kind of surgical or medical procedure. This can be noticed most when hearing Overwatch's voice, in which case it uses terminology like amputate, isolate, cauterize, and just all of these. We also find terminology like this in code for different weapons. Manhacks are called viscerators, and sentry guns are known as sterilizers. In the case of the Antibody Protection Force, well, its name also reflects its job. It suppresses antigens, except in this case, anti-citizens is what they're suppressing. Overall, the suppressor is a marvel of Combine transhuman engineering, and similar can be said for our next unit, the Combine Ordinal. Now, the Combine Ordinal, as its name suggests, gives out orders to its fellow Combine. It's often referred to as a Combine captain for this reason. It, again, has multiple different armor pads, about the same amount as the Combine soldier. In fact, I actually think that the Ordinal ranks above or equally with the Combine soldiers. They may serve to train Combine grunts in combat outside of a military setting, possibly to get them to the level of soldiers so that they can be promoted in Overwatch's ranks. As a result of their status as the squad's main tactician, Ordinals have the most intense vocoding, most obviously to conceal their tactics effectively. Now, the Combine Ordinal is a pretty standard transhuman format, essentially being the Combine soldier with a little bit of the grunt style mixed in. So, something I would like to analyze regarding the Ordinal is this animation by the Parry God called Protectors. It's just about the most lore-accurate animation regarding the Combine that I've ever seen, and I can't stop rewatching it. I mean, it literally shows a scanner that is partially activated, presumably after some kind of fight, broadcasting penal code 647E.
Pick up 647E reading. Copy. Possible 647E. Alert tag units.
Which is a penal code for workers who are loitering or off the job. Later on in the animation, a squad of 2 grunts, an APF, and an Ordinal move in, and are partially ambushed, with one of the grunts being shot. Immediately, the APF moves in to suppress the rebel so that the Ordinal and grunt can move in. The APF, however, is hit by a shotgun. He notifies the Ordinal that his body pack is holding, which seems to be some kind of terminology for one's armor being damaged. As a result of this, the Ordinal immediately takes action by sending a viscerator to distract the rebels in place of the suppressor, something which the Ordinal is actually capable of in-game. The rebels deal with the manhack quickly, but in doing so, one of them mistakenly compromises their position. With that, they all start falling, and the squad moves in and finishes off the rest of them. While not exactly canon, this animation is still an amazing example of how the Ordinal utilizes tactics and can quickly change them if something goes wrong. But what unit fills this role in the military setting? That is to say, who commands the Ordinals and the Combine soldiers when they need to engage in combat against actual paramilitary? Well, to find who fills that role, we turn to the Combine Elite. Now, I don't know that much about the Combine Elite, as it's almost exactly a reskin of the Combine Soldier. However, we do notice that its helmet is, of course, a whole Cyclops, an artificial Cyclops to be exact. Its ears also seem to have special augments that, combined with the red eye, may significantly enhance its senses. Additionally, it has a much larger neck guard and thicker armor, with a special insignia on its chest, one which is the same as the one on the shotgun soldier. As stated by a commenter in the first part, this may show that the Combine shotgun soldiers and elites share a role, in terms of being needed in situations where high force is necessary. Between the two, I assume that shotgun soldiers are chosen when there is a need for raw force, and elites chosen when there is a need for that raw force to be precision-based. I know we see Combine snipers at times in Half-Life 2, but I wouldn't be surprised if elites even acted as assassin snipers in a way, when necessary. And speaking of raw amounts of force, there is one final Combine unit that I have neglected to mention. Until now. This unit is the Combine Charger. Now, I didn't put Wallhammer here because it was at the top of Combine ranking or anything. I just put it here because it's my favorite Combine unit. In my playthrough of Half-Life Alyx, going up against a Wallhammer was one of the most terrifying non-horror experiences I ever had in a video game. It has my favorite voice effect out of all the Combine, and it has the most imposing stature of all of them. As its name under Combine terminology suggests, it serves to be a wall between units like Ordinals and grunts and hostile combatants, and when necessary, it will be aggressive as well. Again, it's non-canon, but the animation by Perigod called Patient Zero is an amazing example of what makes these units terrifying. Now, the Combine Charger itself is adorned with huge pads of ballistic armor. They're a combination of hard metal armors that are present in the outer shoulders and neck guard, and softer but still robust armor toward its inner shoulders and torso. Interestingly, this unit seems to adopt the same stance as the Suppressor, and with that, its armor has the same design philosophy, with the neck guard being more robust on its left side, as it fires with its left foot forward. The same applies to its arms. Its left arm is heavily guarded, and its right arm is thin and unarmored. In combat, the Combine Charger will fill the role of the wall and the hammer. When the wall, it'll fill a similar role as the Suppressor, especially when the Suppressor is not present or dead. It'll attempt to allow other units to flank while it lays on some suppressing fire to keep hostiles in cover. However, if a Suppressor is present, or when the opportunity presents itself, or when it's solo active, it will be utilized as the hammer, rapidly pushing towards the hostile to quickly dispatch them. They use their shotgun to do this, a large weapon that can cause really devastating damage. However, this shotgun is very heavy, and that weight, along with the weight of all their armor, causes them to walk slightly facing upward and very slow. This is their primary weakness, and it also looks kind of funny, and thus they perform better with a Suppressor or with an Ordinal present. Now, all of the Combine that I've talked about have a variety of voice lines, and the Charger in particular has ones that straight up make fun of you. Now, I know the other Half-Life Alyx Combine units have voice lines like this. But the Charger's lines were the first ones I heard in game, and they feel like they have a lot more of an intimidating presence, and they're also kind of funny. Like, he literally makes fun of the player, saying,
Spikes ineffective. Target is unskilled.
Like, target is unskilled? Have you seen yourself? You're covered head to toe in armor and you're gonna call me? Overall, this is one of my favorite Combine units of all time. Primarily because I watched these animations by the Perigod, and because of my experiences in Half-Life Alyx. They are one of my favorite pieces of Combine engineering by far, and I hope to see more of them in the future Half-Life installments, which it seems like we'll actually be getting some. Finally! And that brings me to the end of this analysis. I've been meaning to update my take on the Combine-Infantry since I made that first Half-Life analysis video, and I hope that I've now done so adequately. With that being said, thanks for watching, and goodbye.